Senator, when one puts on the robe, the person's role changes.
Mr. Tung, is this you holding a sign that says union no?
Senator, that is me from over 20 years ago when I was in college exercising my First Amendment rights. Senator, every litigant who would come before my court, should I be so lucky to be confirmed as a judge, would be treated with, man or woman, would be treated with equality, dignity, and respect.
Well, that's why we're asking this question. But what are the live issues that you're referencing that keep you from answering Senator Durbin's questions and my questions?
Senator, matters of policy and of sociology.
What is the live issue you're referencing that's keeping you from answering Senator Durbin's question and my question?
Senator, I apologize. I'm not understanding the question.
Well, you are hiding behind a, quote, live issue concern for not answering Senator Durbin's question or my question.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to America First, the channel that brings you the truth the mainstream media won't tell you. We've got another eye-opening video for you today. Before we dive into this absolute circus of a confirmation hearing, make sure you smash that like button if you believe in constitutional principles and traditional American values. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because we're bringing you content that matters every single day. Also, Patriots, if you want to support the work we're doing here at America First, head over to patreon.com/AmericaFirst where you can support us for as low as $5 a month. Your support helps us keep bringing you the unfiltered truth about what's happening in Washington and across our great nation. Today, we're breaking down a confirmation hearing that perfectly encapsulates everything that's wrong with the modern Democratic Party and their war on traditional American values. We're watching Senator Alex Padilla, a California Democrat, interrogate Judicial nominee Eric Tung in what can only be described as a political hit job disguised as legitimate questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colleagues, I want to follow up on an issue and comments that were raised by Ranking Member Durbin because I've had the opportunity to take a look at Mr. Tung's background. We've had an opportunity to have a conversation via Zoom. And I know he has strong views about how other people's families should function and what women should be allowed and not allowed to do. I'll quote from Mr. Tung's previous writings. He has criticized the so-called, quote, welfare state for the, quote, dissolution of the family, end quote. He has said he, quote, believes in emphasizing family and what it means for a woman to be a good wife and partner, end quote. He has said, and I find this reprehensible, that he, quote, believes in gender roles and that women are simply better than men at some things. When these radical feminists try to blur gender roles, they undermine institutions like marriage, institutions which hold society together, end quote. Mr. Tung, can you list for us the things that you believe are, quote, simply women are, quote, simply better at than men?
Senator, again, the comments you're referencing and captured by a Yale Daily News reporter were captured over 20 years ago when I was an undergraduate in college.
Yes, I understand that, but that was 2006, not 1956. Even the year 2006, I don't think the country's mood, let alone the law, was what you're suggesting here.
Senator, my wife is sitting behind me, and I can tell you that she is better at many things and not just some things than I am. She worked on the Hill, she worked in the White House, and she worked for a Fortune 1 company.
So then do you still believe that women should stay home and not go out into the workplace?
Senator, the suggestion that I think women should not be provided with the same professional opportunities as men is inaccurate.
So at what point in the last 20 years, not 50 or 60, just in the last 20 years, did your mind change on this?
Senator, my views on policy matters and sociological matters that you're referencing, again, are the subject of wide debate. And for that reason, as a nominee sitting here today before the committee, I cannot
But there's a couple of reasons that bring
candidates.
this up, and there are some other issues I want to get to. But first of all, I think for any person to come into a courtroom, they deserve to know that they're going to be given a fair trial, fair consideration in a proceeding. So given your very public past comments, not long ago history, relatively recent history, how should a woman be entering into your courtroom thinking they're going to get a fair shake if you won't even tell us when and how your mind was changed on this? And you've now referenced twice this concern about live issues. So what item is working its way through the judiciary that may well appear on the Ninth Circuit for you to consider and rule on?
Senator, every litigant who would come before my court, should I be so lucky to be confirmed as a judge, would be treated with, man or woman, would be treated with equality, dignity, and respect.
Well, that's why we're asking this question. But what are the live issues that you're referencing that keep you from answering Senator Durbin's questions and my questions?
Senator, matters of policy and of sociology.
What is the live issue you're referencing that's keeping you from answering Senator Durbin's question and my question?
Senator, I apologize. I'm not understanding the question.
Well, you are hiding behind a, quote, live issue concern for not answering Senator Durbin's question or my question.
Senator, the live issues that you're referencing are based on certain
No,
comments.
I want to know what
that
you're
made.
referencing.
Senator, the live issues that I'm referencing are matters of policy and sociology that impinge on gender-related issues.
So anything that could be a topic of conversation anywhere in the country at any time will keep you from answering our specific questions. Let me move on to one more item then. Because you've been a prolific writer, not just on your views about women, but on views on American workers. My colleague, Senator Schiff, raised an incident, a Labor Day protest that you were one of the leaders of you were president at the time for the Committee for Freedom. The protest in question, protesters there had a message, quote, "End mandatory maternity leave. It hurts women." Others held signs that said, "Workers of the world, get back to work." And Mr. Tung specifically wanted to tell the Yale campus that unionized labor hurts consumers. Mr. Tung, is this you holding a sign that says union no?
Senator, that is me from over 20 years ago when I was in college exercising my First Amendment rights.
Absolutely, and I defend your First Amendment rights, but I also defend labor rights and labor protections in this country. So just as I asked with women a few minutes ago, if a labor issue is before you, how can working men and women come into your courtroom and feel like they're going to get a fair shake given your clearly strong views, not in the long ago past, but in the relatively recent past?
Senator, when one puts on the robe, the person's role changes qualitatively. And I can assure this committee, and I commit to this committee, that if I were fortunate to be confirmed as a judge, I will evaluate each argument advanced by the parties respectfully, carefully, and with the scrutiny that it deserves.
Do you recant this and your other comments that I've cited here today?
Senator Brett.
Senator, again, live issues on policy, I cannot comment.
You do not recant.
Yes. Judicial
Thank you.
canons.
Let me start by saying this. What we witnessed in this hearing is not about judicial qualifications. This is about ideological purity testing and the systematic destruction of anyone who dares to hold traditional conservative values in this country. Senator Padilla is attempting to disqualify a judicial nominee not based on his legal qualifications, not based on his temperament, not based on his understanding of the law, but because he expressed conservative viewpoints about family structure and the role of unions 20 years ago when he was a college student. Think about that for a moment, patriots. We're now living in a country where expressing the belief that traditional family structures are beneficial to society or questioning the impact of radical feminist ideology on our institutions is somehow disqualifying for public service. This is the same party that constantly preaches about diversity and inclusion, yet they want to exclude anyone who doesn't conform to their radical progressive worldview. Let's examine what Eric Tung actually said that has Senator Padilla so worked up. Tung criticized the welfare state for the dissolution of the family. Is this controversial? The evidence is overwhelming that the expansion of welfare programs has indeed contributed to the breakdown of the nuclear family, particularly in inner-city communities. When the government becomes the provider instead of the father, when young women are incentivized to have children out of wedlock because they receive more benefits as single mothers, we see the devastating consequences in communities across America. Tung also said he believes in emphasizing family and what it means for a woman to be a good wife and partner. Again, where is the controversy here? Are we really at a point in America where believing that being a good spouse and partner is important is somehow offensive? The nuclear family has been the bedrock of Western civilization for thousands of years. Study after study shows that children raised in stable, two-parent households have better outcomes academically, economically, and socially. But apparently, if you believe in these fundamental truths, you're unfit to serve as a federal judge. The most telling part of Padilla's attack is when he quotes Tung as saying that women are simply better than men at some things, and that radical feminists trying to blur gender roles undermine institutions like marriage. This statement is both scientifically accurate and common sense. Men and women are different. We have different strengths, different capabilities, different natural inclinations. This isn't sexism, it's biology and thousands of years of human experience. Women are generally better caregivers, more nurturing, more emotionally intelligent. Men are generally physically stronger, more aggressive, better at certain types of spatial reasoning. These aren't stereotypes, they're observable differences that exist across cultures and throughout history. The radical left wants us to pretend these differences don't exist because acknowledging them undermines their gender ideology that claims men and women are identical in all ways except for superficial physical characteristics. But here's what's really insidious about Padilla's line of questioning. He's trying to suggest that because Tung holds these traditional views, women who appear in his courtroom won't receive fair treatment. This is a complete non sequitur. Believing that men and women have different strengths and that traditional family structures are beneficial has absolutely nothing to do with one's ability to apply the law fairly and equally. In fact, I would argue that someone who understands and appreciates the unique contributions of both men and women is more likely to treat everyone with dignity and respect than someone who sees gender as nothing more than a social construct. Tung's response was perfect when he pointed to his wife's accomplished career in government and private industry. This shows that his beliefs about gender roles don't translate into discrimination or limitation of opportunities for women. Now let's talk about the timeline issue that Padilla keeps harping on. He keeps emphasizing that these comments were made in 2006, not 1956, as if traditional conservative values somehow became illegitimate after a certain date. This reveals the progressive mindset perfectly. They believe that their ideology represents the natural progression of human thought, and anyone who doesn't evolve with their timeline is somehow backwards or regressive. But here's the thing, patriots, truth doesn't have an expiration date. The principles that made America great, the values that built the strongest, most prosperous civilization in human history, don't become invalid because it's 2006 instead of 1956. If anything, the social chaos we've witnessed over the past several decades proves that abandoning traditional values has been disastrous for our society. Look at what's happened since we started embracing the radical feminist ideology that Tung was critiquing. We've seen skyrocketing divorce rates, children growing up without fathers, men becoming increasingly disconnected from family life and responsibility, women being told that career success is more important than family, and the complete breakdown of social cohesion in many communities. The attack on Tung's views about labor unions is equally revealing. Padilla shows him a photo from a Labor Day protest where Tung held signs criticizing mandatory maternity leave and supporting the message that workers should get back to work rather than engaging in union activism. Again, these are legitimate conservative viewpoints that millions of Americans share. The idea that mandatory maternity leave hurts women isn't some fringe theory. Many economists and policy experts have pointed out that when you mandate expensive benefits for certain categories of workers, employers become less likely to hire those workers. If you force businesses to provide extensive paid maternity leave, some employers will be hesitant to hire women of childbearing age because they represent a greater potential cost and disruption to operations. This doesn't mean we don't value mothers or believe women shouldn't have children. It means we understand that government mandates often have unintended consequences that can actually harm the people they're meant to help. But in Padilla's worldview, even questioning the effectiveness of progressive policies is somehow evidence of bias or discrimination. The union issue is particularly important because it goes to the heart of American economic freedom. Tung was protesting the power of unions to force workers into collective bargaining arrangements, whether they want them or not. He was standing up for the right of individual workers to negotiate their own terms of employment without being forced to pay dues to organizations that may not represent their interests or values. This is fundamentally about freedom of association and individual liberty. But the Democratic Party has been completely captured by union bosses who see any criticism of their power as an attack on workers themselves. They can't distinguish between supporting working people and supporting the union bureaucrats who claim to represent them. What's most disturbing about this entire exchange is how it represents the weaponization of the confirmation process. Instead of focusing on Tung's legal qualifications, his judicial philosophy, his understanding of constitutional principles, or his temperament for the bench, Padilla is conducting what amounts to a political loyalty test. This is exactly what's wrong with our confirmation process today. Democrats want judges who will rubber stamp their progressive agenda rather than judges who will faithfully interpret the law. They're not looking for legal expertise or judicial temperament. They're looking for ideological compliance. Tung's response throughout this interrogation was masterful. He consistently referred to these as live issues that he couldn't comment on as a judicial nominee, which is exactly the right approach. Judges are supposed to be impartial. They're not supposed to prejudge cases or announce how they'll rule on future matters that might come before their court. But Padilla wasn't satisfied with this appropriate judicial response. He kept pushing, demanding that Tung essentially renounce his previous statements and adopt progressive viewpoints as a condition of confirmation. This is precisely the kind of ideological purity testing that turns our courts into political weapons rather than neutral arbiters of the law. When Tung said that putting on the robe changes one's role qualitatively, he was articulating a fundamental principle of judicial service. Personal views and policy preferences must be set aside in favor of faithful application of the law. This is what we want from our judges. We want people who can separate their personal beliefs from their judicial duties. But apparently, this isn't good enough for Senator Padilla and his Democratic colleagues. They want judges who share their progressive worldview and will advance their political agenda from the bench. This represents a fundamental misunderstanding of the judicial role and a dangerous threat to the rule of law. The broader implications of this hearing extend far beyond one judicial nomination. This represents the continuing assault on traditional American values and the attempt to make conservative viewpoints not just unpopular, but literally disqualifying for public service. If you believe in traditional marriage, traditional gender roles, free market economics, or individual liberty, the Democratic Party wants to exclude you from positions of authority in our government. This is happening across our society, patriots. We see it in our schools, where teachers with traditional values are being forced out. We see it in our military, where service members are being subjected to progressive indoctrination. We see it in corporate America, where employees are being required to embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology or face termination. The confirmation hearing we just watched is part of this broader cultural revolution aimed at fundamentally transforming America from a nation built on individual liberty, traditional values, and constitutional principles into a progressive utopia where dissent from leftist orthodoxy is not tolerated. We need to understand that this isn't just about politics. This is about the very survival of the American way of life. When holding traditional conservative views becomes disqualifying for public service, when expressing belief in fundamental truths about human nature and family structure is treated as bigotry, when defending individual liberty against government overreach is seen as extremism, we are no longer living in a free society. The fact that Eric Tung had to sit there and endure this character assassination for expressing mainstream conservative viewpoints 20 years ago as a college student should terrify every American who values freedom of thought and expression. If this becomes the standard, who among us would be willing to serve in government? Who would want to subject themselves and their families to this kind of treatment? This is exactly why we need more conservative voices in our judiciary, our government, and our culture. We need people who are willing to stand up for traditional American values, even when it's difficult, even when they face attacks from a radical left, even when their past statements are twisted and weaponized against them. Eric Tung represents exactly the kind of principled conservative we need on the federal bench. Someone who understands the importance of traditional institutions, who recognizes the differences between men and women, who values individual liberty over collective coercion, and who has the courage to stand by his convictions even under intense political pressure. The fact that Senator Padilla and his Democratic colleagues want to disqualify him for these beliefs tells us everything we need to know about their true agenda. They don't want judges who will interpret the law faithfully. They want activists who will advance their progressive ideology from the bench, regardless of what the Constitution actually says. This is why every single one of you watching this video needs to get involved in the political process. We need to support candidates who will appoint and confirm conservative judges. We need to vote in every election from the local school board to the presidency. We need to make our voices heard and push back against this assault on our values and our freedoms. The stakes couldn't be higher, patriots. If we allow the radical left to control our courts, our schools, and our government institutions, we will lose the America that our founders created and that previous generations died to defend. We cannot let that happen. So make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure your family and friends are registered. Support conservative candidates who will fight for our values. And keep watching America First for the truth about what's really happening in our country. If this video opened your eyes to what we're really facing, smash that like button and share it with everyone you know. And remember, you can support our work at patreon.com/America First for as low as $5 a month. Your support helps us continue bringing you the unfiltered truth that the mainstream media won't tell you. Thanks for watching, patriots. Stay strong, stay informed, and never stop fighting for the America we love. We'll see you in the next video.